Hi, my name is Joanay Shepherd, and it's March the 1st, 2012. I'm here at the Honors College doing an interview with Molly Homer, Dr. Molly Homer. And the first question I'm going to ask is, how did you come to write that letter to the ERA in 8th grade?
When you put that in the email that you were going to ask me about that, I had to go back and look at the story that you found. Bill Thompson did an interview for me on the Wow Woman of the Week, probably in 2004. So that was a while ago, and I think what had happened is my mom had given me some old papers, and I found this response from Tom Harkin. And so I don't exactly remember how I wrote that letter. I think it must have been a school project. At the time, the Equal Rights Amendment was, this was probably in 1977. And so at the time, the Equal Rights Amendment was very much in the news. People were campaigning for this. And so I think we had a school project to write to, I lived in Iowa. I grew up in Ames, Iowa, and Tom Harkin was our senator, as he still is the senator in Iowa now.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's been there for a long time. Maybe he was a legislator or something at the time. But anyway, I wrote to him about, I don't know what I wrote. I think I was asking what his position was on the Equal Rights Amendment, and he sent me a reply, and he might have even sent 2 replies, but he was in support of it, and he was thanking me for writing to him. So I think that's probably what happened, but as I said, I only remembered it because just before that interview with Bill Thompson, my mom had given me a whole bunch of stuff from when I was in school, and this was among those letters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So would you say, since you don't remember that, would you what can you recall as your first kind of women's activist?
I mean, I think that was probably it, though. I grew up in a very feminist household. My mom was a very strong feminist, and she was born in 1924, so she was a little bit older than a lot of the real first wave feminists, but she put herself through nursing school and through got her bachelor's degree in public health, and this was in the 1940s and 50s when people in her family didn't leave town and didn't leave home, and she had cousins who didn't go to high school because they were in a rural area, and so she was always a very strong role model. And I think she had 3 sisters, 3 or 4, I forget, because they've all passed away, but she had very strong sisters who, a lot of them put themselves through nursing school. 3 in her family were nurses. Another was an engineer. One of my aunts was an engineer who worked for John Deere, and that was really unheard of because she was going to engineering school in the 40s. And so I had all these really strong role models, and then I have 3 sisters myself, and so who are all older than I am, and so I grew up in a household of very strong women, and very much encouraged to think that way, and that you can be anything you want to be and not be restricted by what traditional roles for women had been. So I think it's hard for me to define my first feminist act because I just grew up believing that it was almost my duty to not pursue just a traditional path, but to not be limited by what traditional expectations were. And certainly in the 70s, when I was in grade school and then in junior high, that was a really active time for feminism. It was very much in the news. It was the Equal Rights Amendment was a big thing, and my mom, although she didn't work after she started a family, she was a little bit unusual in my grade school. Early in grade school, all the mothers were at home, but by the time I was done with grade school, most of the mothers were working. So that it was a big shift right between, say, 1972 and 1977 that a lot of women went back to work. And so it's something everybody talked about. It's something that was very much on my mind and people's minds when I was growing up. So I guess what I did myself that might have been a feminist. Obviously, I wrote this letter in 8th grade to Tom Harkin, but I think I was prompted to do that either by a teacher or, my mom might have suggested that as a topic, but I think I chose topics. I wanted to do things in math and things that weren't seen as being girls' topics, that I didn't want to be limited by what had been seen as traditional female roles. So, so I guess it's not so much a first act, but just more I grew up in that atmosphere. Does that help? Okay,
that's great.
Okay.
Can you tell me about how you became interested in WOW?
Yeah, I came here in 2003. I had been bouncing around in different temporary teaching positions, and so I came here in 2003 to be the honors advisor, and I got to know Sue Martinelli Fernandez, who is now the Dean of Arts and Sciences, but at the time she was on my search committee, and she also, very shortly after I came, became the Associate Director of the Honors College, so I got to know Sue very well that year. And she at the time was really involved with WOW. She has been involved with WOW over the years, and she talked to me a lot about WOW and, understood that I was a feminist, and so she encouraged me to become involved with WOW, and I think talked me into being the treasurer because she knew I was very detail-oriented person, and she had been the treasurer before, and so she got me to be the treasurer probably the fall of 2004, and so I became the treasurer in 2004, and so then I became an officer and was very obviously involved with WOW after that. But it was more because I knew her and she reached out to me to become involved. So that's how I first got involved.
Okay. So you said you came here from, what made you come to this region?
I grew up in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, both my parents were still living in Ames. Now, my dad lives in Ames. My mom has since passed away. But I'd been bouncing around in a lot of different positions. I'd lived in San Diego. I'd lived in Canada. I'd lived in Pittsburgh. And I wanted a permanent job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had been teaching linguistics. And there aren't a lot of permanent or full-time positions in linguistics, and so I'd been doing 1-year positions for about 6 years, and I really needed a change, and I thought, well, I had been the linguistics advisor at my last position at Pitt. That was part of my job in addition to teaching 2 classes, and so I started looking for advising positions and also positions closer to where my parents lived, and I went to graduate school at University of Illinois.
Oh.
So I'd lived in Illinois before and had friends here and friends in Chicago, but also friends in Champaign-Urbana. And so this was and my mom grew up in Fort Madison, so I was familiar with this particular area too. So I was looking for a permanent job. I was looking for something in advising and something a lot closer to where my family lives.
Okay. Can you discuss WOW's growth since you became active in 2003?
Right. I guess, I don't know that we've grown in numbers, but we've certainly shifted in the types of things that, WOW has always been an activist organization and always looking at trying to improve conditions of women on campus. And so I don't want to say that we started doing different things than, because even the 70s, when WOW began, they did a big study, a salary equity study, and that salary equity study looking at how women faculty compared to men faculty, their pay scales, I believe, and as I understand it, led to a lot of contractual changes that eventually led to minimum lanes, and that pretty much helped get rid of a lot of salary inequities among faculty, not necessarily among other people on campus, staff and both administrative staff like me and clerical staff and civil service. There still could be lots of inequities, and I believe there's a committee right now that's looking at that. But so WOW has always had a tradition of, and it was probably formed, that was one of the reasons it was formed, is looking at the condition of women and trying to change things on campus for the better for women. But when I joined in 2003, and then over about the next, and probably until now, the focus, one of our focuses became looking at family-friendly policies. And I would say that began maybe more like around 2004, 2005, when Bill Thompson got more involved with WOW. He had been really involved with the union, with the UPI, and I know that when he was co-president, that WOW and the UPI worked together to extend the parental leave benefit when people have babies. At that point, before that, it had been mostly, as I understand it, just a benefit for women. It wasn't also for the father, and also it wasn't nearly as long. Okay, so in 2007, the contract extended the parental leave benefit to be 20 days, or it was more like 4 weeks of paid leave, not coming out of sick leave, and also it had the same benefit for both parents. So not just mother and father, but for same-sex couples too, I think. So that was kind of a shift that we started looking at. How do we, because many women are caregivers or are working mothers, and how can we improve conditions for women at Western? One of the ways is to make it easier for them to work here. And by making it easier for them to work here, will attract more women, and it just is. Oh, and it also helps men too, because men have families, that attracts all workers. But the shift came more, I think, in 2004, 2005, when we started looking at those things. And so other things that we've addressed, not just the parental leave benefit, we've also looked at elder care, and that's something I was more involved with than anything else. And but we also looked at lactation facilities, and so there were a few of us who were WOW officers over that span of time, who all had different kind of pet projects that they were interested in terms of making Western a more family-friendly place. But we all worked together, and WOW is continuing to work on those issues. And so I would say Laura Ebert Wallace, who I was co-president with, she was very interested in the lactation facility aspect of things, because her research was on breastfeeding and lactation and the Nursing Mothers in the Workplace Act, and so her focus was on looking at how compliant Western is with that law, and also trying to make it just easier for nursing mothers to find nursing facilities on campus. And as a result, WOW has worked with EOA to have put on the EOA website where you can find lactation rooms and what the rule, how to reserve them. And so that was, we all worked together, but that was more Laura's focus. Bill was very interested in the parental leave benefit, but also helped with other things. And he was also interested in elder care, and I was really interested in elder care because this is something that affected me personally during that time, my mom, she passed away in 2007, and for about 2 years before that, she probably had dementia before that, but we were very much aware that she had dementia since 2005. And so for those 2 years, I spent a lot of time helping my dad take care of her and going back and forth to Iowa. And so this is something that at the time I was thinking, well, I'm not married, I don't have children, so a lot of WOW's family-friendly benefits don't necessarily apply to me, and yet I have a family too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that this is a way that WOW could address, have a family-friendly benefit or fight for something that affects me too, and not that I'm not supportive of working mothers, and I'm very supportive of that, but this is something that I felt personally affected by. So I think that was something I was really interested in, and so this is something that we conducted a survey in 2008, and I think that, and I printed out a copy of the study that resulted from that, and you can have that, but mostly it was Laura Ebert-Wallace and Bill Thompson and me, and we worked together developing this survey, and there are a few other people that helped, but we sent this survey out in the fall of 2008 to every Western employee, just asking them how, if they have a parent or, some elderly relative that they are taking care of or providing some care for. It could be just like cleaning their house once in a while, or it could be a lot more intense care. And just to get a feel for how many employees at Western were impacted by this, and also to get a feel for what kind of benefits could be developed to help people deal with that. Because for me at the time, it was very difficult to work and do that at the same time, especially since my mom lived 4.5 hours away, and so I was taking a lot of time off, and I probably took 40 days of vacation that last year, and so it's something that, how can we help people because almost everyone might have to go through this at some point, and so how do we help people go through that without them losing their jobs, and so we conducted the survey, and the survey was asking how are you affected by this, how many people were affected by this, and we found that over 50% of Western employees have at some point while they worked at Western had to care for an elderly relative, and this was men and women. And then we also were asking what kinds of benefits would they like the most to help them, and the ones that we found were the most desired would be paid time off to deal with this, and flexible scheduling. Okay, so we had a starting point, and then it also turned out that at this time, you'll find that most people, I don't want to say most people, but WOW has had a very strong interaction with the UPI. Okay, so this is the union that is covering all faculty on campus, and also academic support professionals, which I am an academic support professional, and so UPI probably has 800 members on campus, and so there's traditionally been a very strong interaction between UPI and WOW, and it happens that a lot of the time the WOW board also is very active in the UPI as well, and at this time that was the case. Bill was probably on the UPI exec board. He'd been on the negotiating team for the 2007 contract. I am now on the UPI exec board. I wasn't at the time, but I was, getting to be a more active member of UPI. Laura Ebert-Wallace, I think at that time, was the secretary on the UPI board. And so the nice relationship is that WOW can go around and figure out what kind of benefits we want to promote, and then UPI can negotiate them with the administration. And so the timing was that we had our survey, and we ended up having a contract extension negotiated in 2010, I believe, and I think it was spring of 2010. And so one of the things that we negotiated for was an elder care related benefit, and we got it, and it's a very small benefit, but it's a starting point, and it's kind of an unusual benefit that when we were doing our research, we saw that elder care benefits and resources were things that a lot of corporations are looking at, because more and more of their workers are affected by, have elderly parents and are having to deal with this. And so by developing elder care resources, they're helping to retain their employees and make their employees more happy while they're there and have more loyalty. I think we didn't see quite as many at universities, and what we didn't see that much was any kind of paid time off. But we felt that a paid time off, even if it's just a very minimal one, was kind of parallel to parental leave, because when you have a baby, the university gives you 20 days of paid leave that is not part of taken out of your sick leave. And so we're looking at the other end of the spectrum when you have a parent or a spouse or somebody who dies. You get, at the time I think it was 5 days of bereavement, and that's after they die. You weren't getting any paid time off while the person was dying, and so a lot of the time that's a really intense time for people. And in my own case, my mom passed away in fall of 2007, and when she went into hospice, it was probably less than 2 weeks later that she actually passed away. And we found out that this is pretty common, that when someone enters hospice or gets a terminal diagnosis, usually it's not very long after that they actually pass away. But this was a really intense time when I was barely here, and so that if it would be a nice symmetry if you have parental leave, and that's really important because you need to physically recover from having the baby, or if you adopt a baby, you need to bond with the baby. That's a really important time to be with your child. But also at the other end, when you have a parent or loved one who's passing away, and that they're going to pass away pretty soon, that's also really important to be with that person and not have to take it out of sick leave, because it's not really, you're not sick, it's somebody else who is. So what we got, and what we negotiated, what we eventually got was the concern for the administration, and I can see this as well. How do you determine, you're not, when a baby's born, you don't really know when someone's going to die. And so how do you really know how much time a person's going to take? And so what we settled on, what we agreed to, is there has to be a diagnosis, either a terminal diagnosis or being entered into a hospice is the equivalent of that. And the other piece of it was it couldn't be too open-ended, so we're starting with, I think it's 10 days, so it's 2 weeks, and the 10 days don't have to be taken all at once. So you could be taking 2 days this week, 2 days another week, as long as it doesn't add up to more than 10 days. And that way, at least it's, in my case, I was probably taking 40 days off that last year, but at least it would have helped.
Right.
I used a lot of vacation, and so, but at least it would have helped. So this was something that the UPI relationship with WOW was very helpful, because the same people who were doing the study and interested in promoting this also were connected with the UPI board, and John Miller was negotiating the contract, and Bill and I were both on the exec board talking to John Miller a lot while he was negotiating that, so it worked out very well. And so I think in terms of WOW growing, yes, I think it's grown in members. But maybe not a whole lot. It seems to me like it's usually around 40 to 50 dues-paying members. And actually, Erin Taylor, when she became co-president, she was very good at trying to increase membership after I was no longer co-president. So that's, somebody who's actually trying to organize membership and get more members. But I would say while I was really involved with WOW, it was more a shift in what kind of activism we were doing and what kind of policies we were pushing for, and they tended to be shifting more towards family-friendly policies. Another thing that started happening during that time too was our every summer we were having and we still do this, a meeting with the president and the provost. And I think this had been done even in 2004, but it became more of it had happened more in the spring, and we started doing it in the summer, and it became more of an annual thing and an expectation. The president expected to come to this every summer. And so we usually have this in June and July, and it's we invite the president and provost for an hour, or longer, but they usually only give us an hour. They only have an hour to spare, and we ask them questions. They have time to make a statement about how they think things are going, but the bulk of it is asking questions. And some of the questions are pretty tough, and some of the questions have been led to new policies because in certain cases the president or the provost might not have been aware of a particular situation. So, for example, I believe that at one discussion we were talking about bereavement time and how administrators only get 3 days of bereavement time when a parent or family member passes away, whereas faculty and I get 5 days, and they weren't aware of this, so I don't know if that policy has changed, but sometimes, and the lactation facilities, a lot of that movement has come as a result of these summer discussions with the president and the provost. So that's something that, even though I think it was started before I got really involved with WOW, it's become more solidified, and it's now, Jack Thomas has been to many of these, and so he's expecting to talk to WOW every summer and ready to talk to us, and so I think that's a shift too, that we've become more visible to the administration. Jack Thomas, when he was provost, invited WOW representation on his advisory board or his advisory committee, and that was nice because then we were alternated who went to that, but then we had a voice at the provost advisory committee, and so by having these meetings we became more visible to the administration, and then they would come to us and ask for our input about things. So that was a really long-winded answer, but I guess the growth is more shift to what types of things we were fighting for, and how our connection was with UPI helped to lead to some results. Yeah,
that was great.
Okay.
Okay, what do you think is your single best memory with WOW as an organization?
I would say I'm probably most proud of the elder care benefit, because that's something I felt really strongly about, and that I think I was most involved with. So I proudest of that, I think, and I've had lots of great memories with WOW. It's nice camaraderie. I like the people I've met through WOW, but I think of all the things, when I look back to 2004 when I first became involved. That's the thing that I'm most proud of because, I worked really hard with Bill Thompson and Laura Ebert Wallace on that, and then as a result, something changed. And, we were wanting to build on that, but we've got to start, so as a result of a survey that WOW did, then it actually resulted in a contractual change. So,
is WOW available to for students to join?
Yes, it actually is, and it's not widely known. And in fact, sometimes WOW board members forget that. And I think this question came up, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I was on the board, and we looked through our bylaws, and we actually do accept student members. I don't think I have any WOW brochures with me. I used to have a whole bunch in my office, but if you look on our website, there's information about how to join WOW, and there are different dues levels. I think for a faculty or staff member, it's something like $20 a year. It's based on your income. But for students, I think it's $2 a year, $3 a year. I don't know that we have any student members, and I think part of that is that people join organizations a lot of times based on who they know, and if they know other people who are in WOW, then that's who joins WOW. But it's open to students. Now, there's also the Feminist Action Alliance, and I think that is primarily a student organization. So it might be that students haven't joined WOW, one, because they don't know about it, and two, because there's already a very student-centered feminist organization that covers a lot of and there's cooperation between the two. And then there's there's the Macomb Feminist Network, which some members of WOW are members of that as well, and there might be student members of that, but that's more of a community-based feminist organization. So,
okay, you said back in the 70s there was a lot of feminism, and no matter where you go, people were campaigning about it, people spoke out about it. Do you believe in recent years that feminism has been dying?
Yeah, I guess it's hard for me to answer that, given that, I see that it's certainly a lot less visible, and it could be that a lot of the things that, one answer might be, well, we don't need to fight for those things anymore because we got them, but I don't think that's completely true, because the ERA never did pass, and so, and I'm not of the age, I'm not a college student, so I don't know. I meet with lots of college students. I talk to them about their honors requirements. I don't ask them how they feel about feminism or how they picture themselves, or I don't see that there has been any movement backwards. I have nieces and nephews, and I feel like they all seem very enlightened and don't have the stereotypes, the gender-based stereotypes, or they don't feel any limitations about what they can and can't do. And my nephews, I'm happy to say, don't seem to have negative or stereotypical attitudes about women, and the women that they've dated or have married have all seemed to be very strong women, and they seem to be very respectful of them. So I'm happy about that. But it does seem very less visible, and so I guess in terms of how loud or how much people talk about it has really diminished quite a bit. And also, I don't know, it's interesting because people that you think are maybe more traditionalist and you might believe to be, who talk a lot about family values, which sometimes makes me think keep women at home and don't let them do things. Some of the people who speak who have that position are women themselves, like Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann, who politically I would think would be not feminists, and yet they are very strong women, so I guess they don't feel limited by anything either, because they're certainly going out and doing things that they wouldn't have been able to do, or would have been very, very unusual 30, 40 years ago. The other thing that I know, and I don't see this quite so much, this hasn't been talked about much the last 3 or 4 years, but the number of women who are in college versus men. So 3 or 4 years ago, this was a big topic in higher ed, that if you look at people who were in college, 60% of them were women and only 40% were men. And that's not the population. And so it seemed that people were alarmed, because what's going to happen to all the young men who aren't going on and aren't doing well in school, or aren't achieving as much. And there were all these theories about, girls in school do better because in grade school and high school they reward you for doing things that girls are good at anyway, like listening and following directions or things like that. And but they didn't say that 40, 50 years ago when men were doing men were in school and doing better in school and going on and achieving. So I don't know if that's totally true, but the fact that women are outnumbering men in higher ed and in professional schools and in the honors college, the balance is that there are more women than men in the honors college. And so that maybe this, even though we're not talking about feminism, that we're living it, or that the things that we fought a lot for aren't as much an issue now. I hope so. I hope that's the case anyway. In my life, when I grew up, I said I was in a very strong feminist household and feminist family, and with lots of strong women. But after I graduated from college, for a while I lived in Utah, and I was working at a defense contractor. And this was the first time in my life where I worked at a place and met people who felt I shouldn't be working, because the atmosphere was a lot more traditional, and it was a technology company, so that was part of it, that there were fewer women, but also because it was in Utah, and it was 80% of the people who worked there were LDS, and so that was probably the first time in my life where I felt like there are people here who who would put limits on me, or that didn't. I did well, and I did my job, but I think there are pockets, there are areas. I don't want to say that there are, women are totally uninhibited and can do anything they want, and no one is putting any obstacles on women. I just think it's maybe less prevalent than it used to be.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what a spinster is? Okay. I looked at your interview and I was like, I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. So it's it's a slang term for someone who's not married, and it's a derogatory term, So it's, yeah. No, I used it, and I was using it in a joking way, but that I think it comes from spinning, that back, that, and I'm going to mess this up because I'll get the etymology wrong, but that back in the day when a woman was unmarried and she didn't have a family and she stayed at home with her parents, and and they make her spin yarn, or that this was a job that had to be done, and maybe this is how it evolved, that she never got married, she's gonna a burden on her family, she's a spinster, so it was it's an old-fashioned term, but read a lot of novels that are older, and so they talk about this a lot, that oh no, this is a horrible thing, that this is the worst thing that could happen to you, is that you never get married and you're a spinster, and so it's kind of a derogatory term. But I don't know if you've ever seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I don't think they say spinster, but when I have a sister who's a librarian, and she's actually married, and so she's married and a librarian. But when he's goes back to where he'd never been born, and seeing how people were affected, and how his wife was affected, is she never got married, and he asks where she is, and they say, no, you're not going to like it, and they say, oh, she's about to close up the library, like this is a horrible thing, like it's a fate worse than death, she became a librarian because you were never born, and so in that movie you would say, she's a spinster, this is that her life was, she wore glasses, and she wasn't wearing makeup, and this is all because she never met Jimmy Stewart and never got married, and so that's what it means. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So I was joking around with Bill, but it's, when people are, you get to a certain age, and people expect you to be married, and so you aren't, and people, it's okay, it's okay not to be married, and you can have a full life that way, but that this is a way of kind of owning it and joking about it, that yes, that's what I am, I'm a spinster, and not just use the term and not be euphemistic about it. And I think in that interview I was talking about, I've actually, had role models. My aunt, who I talked about, mm-hmm. she never was married, but she did all these interesting things. And I think between, my mom was a feminist, but I think my mom grew up in a time, she was affected by her time, so when she got married, it was 1952, and you did, if you didn't have to work and your husband was working and had a good job, you stopped working when you got married. And so she did, and she never went back to work. And I think that if she had been born 10 years later, she would have kept working, and things would have been different. So just looking at my mom versus my aunt, that, not to say my mom didn't get to do really interesting things, but my aunt, because she was never married, she lived in Colorado, and then she lived in Alaska, and she did graduate school at Yale, and she was the president of the Colorado Heart Association, and so she got to do a lot of things that I think that my mom envied, or that because my mom had 5 kids and had to raise them all, that and because she was kind of bound at that time not to work, or it was expected that you wouldn't. I think that she had so much more freedom by not being married at that time. That's not the case anymore, but because I know all sorts of people who are married and have children and work and they're faculty and they do all sorts of things. But at the time, though, it was seen as, we've got my Aunt Rita, she didn't have children, was that a sad thing or not? Or, should you? And I didn't feel sorry for her because she had a really great life. So, that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So, what other questions do you have? Or,
do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, okay. All right. I really wanted to cover the family-friendly benefits thing, and the whole relationship between UPI and WOW, and the elder care benefits issues. So, no, I think I pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. And
well, thank you.
You're welcome.
It was great.